Good evening. It's Friday, the 17th of October. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. The names of the 3 Israelis killed in this week's avalanche in Nepal have been released for publication. They are 25-year-old IDF captain Tamar Ariel, who made history by becoming the first religious female navigator in the Air Force. The resident of Kibbutz Masuot Yitzchak was taking time out from active duty to travel. 23-year-old Agam Luria was a resident of Kibbutz Yifat who flew abroad after the completion of his military service. Other Israeli survivors of the October 14th avalanche told reporters that Luria asked rescuers to evacuate his fellow countrymen before they assisted him. 30-year-old Nadav Shoham of Mitzpeh, Hoshaya, was taking a break from his studies at the Technion to travel abroad. And meanwhile, concern is mounting over the fate of a 4th Israeli who remains missing in Nepal, identified as 36-year-old Michal Gili Charcheski of Givatayim, who was in the area at the time. Local authorities are reporting that 29 confirmed deaths, but that death toll is expected to rise because of the unaccounted whereabouts of dozens of climbers. And the search for the missing resumed near Nepal's popular Annapurna Trail at daybreak today. We get more from IBA's Aryeh O'Sullivan.
Rescuers have widened their searches for trekkers stranded along the towering peaks of the Himalayas, where it's hoped some of the missing are still in shelters in small lodges along the Annapurna Trail. The helicopters are bringing down rescued trekkers, but also many bodies. The death toll has reached 29, including trekkers from Canada, India, Poland, and Israel, as well as Nepali guides. At least 70 more hikers are still unaccounted for, but even this number could rise. A short while ago, the Army hospital in Kathmandu received a young Israeli man who was rescued from the site of the avalanche, and he had been buried in the snow up to his shoulders. Other Israeli trekkers with him were able to pull him out and bring him to a village, and from there he was evacuated by a helicopter. Outside the hospital, a few Israeli survivors spoke about their ordeal.
I was stuck in snow till here, and then one Nepali guy that knows the way saw me, and he asked me to stay with him and just drag me, really dragged me till the...
Our plan was to spend the night at this tea shop and get out in the morning and see the weather. We was lucky and the weather was sunny, and the
storm was stopped.
Yeah, the storm was stopped.
We really don't know what happened because we're out of contact. As you know, there is no reception in many places in Nepal at the moment. So we don't know where is the other people, but we're sure that everything is okay.
There are now 8 dozen Israelis who are being treated at the hospital in Kathmandu, and none of them are in life-threatening condition. They're suffering from frostbite mainly. Israeli doctors in Nepal are helping treat the injured, but say there's a lack of some medicines. The Israelis are working on getting medicine through insurance companies. Magen David Adom has sent a delegation to Nepal to help the medical treatment. The reason why so many people have been affected by this storm is that this is the peak time of Nepal's trekking season, when the weather is usually at its best. Trekking is usually safer than mountaineering, but these are the world's highest mountains and are inherently dangerous. Aryeh O'Sullivan for IBA News.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is warning that the unresolved Israeli-Palestinian conflict is fueling recruitment for the Islamic State, making the achievement of peace between the two sides now more critical than ever. Speaking at a White House ceremony for the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Adha, Kerry said that every leader that he's met with has told him that the lack of a peace deal is encouraging greater numbers to join ISIS, as well as increase street anger and agitation among youth.
We're living at a point in time where there are just more young people demanding what they see the rest of the world having than at any time in modern history. And when you have 65% of a country, as you do in many countries in the Middle East or South Central Asia or elsewhere, in North Horn of Africa, that are under the age of 35, 65%. And 60% under the age of 30, and 50% under the age of 25. You are going to have a governance problem unless your governance is really addressing the demands and needs of that part of the population. And I don't care who you are or what kind of government you have, nobody is impregnable with respect to those demands and those needs and they have to be responded to at some point in time. I think that it is more critical than ever that we be fighting for peace. And I think it is more necessary than ever. As I went around and met with people in the course of our discussions about the ISIL coalition, the truth is there wasn't a leader I met with in the region who didn't raise with me spontaneously the need to try to get peace between Israel and the Palestinians, because it was a cause of recruitment and of street anger and agitation that they felt, and I see a lot of heads nodding, they had to respond to. And people need to understand the connection of that. And it has something to do with humiliation and denial and absence of dignity. The world is looking to all of us. We are the leaders. We have this opportunity in this moment to try to make a difference. And it is imperative that every single one of us make every effort to listen to each other, to do everything in our power to be able to have an impact.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has declared his intention to submit draft resolution to the United Nations Security Council by the end of this month, requesting recognition of a Palestinian state within the 1967 lines, as well as proposed deadline for Israel's withdrawal from the West Bank. The Palestinians have been under intense pressure to refrain from unilateral statehood efforts, including alleged threats of cuts in aid from Washington. But PLO Secretary General Yasser Abed Rabo said that a decision was made late Wednesday to advance the initiative. The draft resolution still lacks majority backing at the UNSC and faces being vetoed by the U.S. But Ramallah is likely to consider a possible 9-vote majority in support of the resolution as a diplomatic victory. Other issues under discussion during that late-night meeting included this week's request from U.S. Secretary Kerry for Abbas to delay the submission of any initiatives until the start of next year. According to the PA president, he made a commitment to Kerry that there won't be any internal Palestinian disputes or conflicts with Israel, at least until the end of 2015. Abbas reportedly gave these guarantees in order to encourage donor states to implement their plans for reconstructing the Gaza Strip. Parliamentary members in Spain are set to follow in the steps of their counterparts in Sweden and the United Kingdom today by voting on recognition of a Palestinian state. British legislators resoundingly supported the measure on Monday in a debate that is unlikely to enact any official change in government policy, but is laden with political symbolism. While the UK doesn't classify Palestine as a state, the British MPs say that the country could do so at any time if they believe that it would help peace efforts between the Palestinians and Israel. French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius is also calling on Paris to recognize a Palestinian state, but only, he said yesterday, if it would help to advance peace and is not an empty symbolic gesture. Security forces maintained a high level of alert around Jerusalem's Old City earlier today and restricted the entry of Muslim worshippers seeking to participate in Friday afternoon prayers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque after receiving intelligence that there were plans to riot in the area. Police permitted male worshippers over the age of 50 to enter the compound, and women of all ages were permitted access. A number of clashes between Palestinians and security forces occurred over the Sukkot holiday, with masked Palestinians throwing rocks, iron bars, and firebombs at police who were forced to raid the area in attempts to restore calm. Meanwhile, Hamas leader Khalid Mashal has issued a statement from Qatar urging all Muslims to defend the Al-Aqsa Mosque. He accused Israel of trying to seize control of the mosque and the Temple Mount compound. An investigative report conducted by the Haaretz newspaper into how the IDF conducted Operation Protective Edge alleges that the inadequate training and equipping of troops impeded the Army's ability to destroy the 32 terror tunnels that were unearthed during the conflict with Hamas. The report was published in today's edition of the paper and notes that during the mission to destroy the passages, soldiers were deployed in an area some 2 kilometers wide on the outskirts of urban Palestinian areas along the length of the Gaza Strip. It goes on to claim that the sketchy operational plans, updated at the last minute, were responsible for soldiers being deployed longer than the initial estimates. It also asserts that Air Force strikes on tunnel shafts created more difficulties for ground forces who were attempting to identify the routes of those that they were charged with destroying. Military police are investigating the death of 13-year-old Palestinian Baha Samir Badir, who was killed during yesterday's clashes with IDF soldiers in the West Bank village of Beit Lakia, west of Ramallah, where the funeral was held today. According to an initial probe, the IDF is maintaining that soldiers encountered fierce violence after entering the village in a mission to arrest stone throwers. Soldiers opened fire after the residents threw firebombs and rocks while they were in the area, as well as at their jeeps as they were preparing to leave. In regional news, former Iraqi pilots who joined the Islamic State in Syria are training ISIS members to fly fighter jets captured from the Syrian army. This from the British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights today, reporting that the ISIS pilots are flying the planes over the Al-Jara military airport that they seized east of Aleppo. Meanwhile, the radical Sunni Islamic State is claiming credit for 4 bombings and a mortar strike in Iraq that killed 36 people and wounded 98 others in Shiite areas of Baghdad within just 2 hours yesterday. A 5th Islamic State propaganda video featuring British hostage John Cantley has been released. Similar to the previous ones, the 43-year-old journalist was dressed in an orange prisoner's jumpsuit and appeared to be reading from a teleprompter. He described himself as a British citizen who has been abandoned by his government and warned of an impending third war in the Gulf. He also claimed that U.S. President Barack Obama is pushing for a ground war against the Islamic State and is trying to look tough in the media in an effort to sway voters during the approaching midterm elections. Cantley was abducted in northern Syria 2 years ago. Kurdish fighters say that they have succeeded in driving out Islamic State forces from the Syrian border town of Kobani. A Kurdish military commander told reporters that ISIS withdrew its forces from the town overnight, and his troops are currently combing through the town to ensure that all of the radical jihadis have gone. Locals are expressing concern that a number of Islamic State suicide bombers may remain hidden in parts of Kobani, ready to detonate their explosives. The recent developments come just days after speculation that ISIS could seize control of the entire town, which is just meters from Turkey. Other conflicting reports from Kobani today claim that the fighting between the two sides is steadily intensifying, while U.S. military officials describe the situation on the ground as tenuous. The fighting has forced tens of thousands of Kurds to flee and flood into neighboring Turkey. In other news, a drill was held at the Ben Gurion International Airport this morning aimed at identifying travelers from West African countries infected with Ebola as part of increased measures at all entry points into the country ordered by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last night. It was conducted by officials from the Airport Authority, police, health, immigration, and interior ministries in efforts to prevent the entry of the virus into the country. The simulated arrival of passengers carrying the virus on flights from the targeted nations was included. Those suspected of being ill were quarantined in a special room set up at the airport until their evacuation by Magen David Adom paramedics to an area hospital. The newly instituted precautions include the taking of temperatures of those coming from Liberia, Sierra Leone, Lagos, Nigeria, and Guinea. After his second day of holding talks with a team of medical experts in Washington, U.S. President Obama says that he is considering the appointment of an Ebola czar to oversee American efforts to contain the virus. A second nurse in the U.S. has now been confirmed to have become infected while caring for an Ebola patient from Liberia who died in Dallas. Obama said that while efforts to combat the virus should be better coordinated, he still does not support a travel ban on the entry of travelers from the countries ravaged by the illness.
If we institute a travel ban instead of the protocols that we put in place now, history shows that there is a likelihood of increased avoidance. People do not readily disclose their information. They may engage in something called broken travel, essentially breaking up their trip so that they can hide the fact that they have been to one of these countries where there is a disease in place. And as a result, we may end up getting less information about who has the disease. They're less likely to get treated properly, screened properly, quarantined properly, and as a consequence, we could end up having more cases rather than less.
The founder of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, and his wife, Priscilla Chan, have donated $25 million to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention to help combat the spread of Ebola. The internet entrepreneur made the announcement, where else but on his Facebook page, and said that in response what was behind his significant contribution, that he believes we have a responsibility to help out wherever we see a need. He went on to say that it appears that most people, including governmental leaders, have failed to realize that if the virus is not contained, it will become an epidemic that would have to be dealt with for decades to come. The Heroes to Heroes Foundation is a U.S.-based organization which provides a suicide prevention and post-traumatic stress management program for wounded military veterans. The scarred ex-American soldiers are brought to Israel as part of the treatment, where they team up with wounded IDF veterans in what the foundation is calling a life-changing journey. We get more in this report from Israel Up Close.
I got blown up in Afghanistan. Everyone from my platoon's gone. I'm from a very small town, and no one in my hometown really went through what I went through. I had no one I could talk to about it. Everyone just kind of looked at me like, oh, he's just crazy.
Out of a deep love for her country, Judy Schaefer, the daughter of a World War II veteran, founded Heroes to Heroes, a program that brings wounded U.S. veterans to Israel for spiritual healing and peer support.
I had spent a significant time in Israel, and I saw that Israel really takes care of veterans, takes care of her people, and has a military culture. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to have a peer support program between American wounded vets and Israeli vets? And so we started off as a peer-to-peer support program, but what I saw a year and a half later, I saw spiritual healing. And I saw them getting their faith back. I saw our veterans literally transform over a 10-day period. Working with people who have PTSD, PTS, brain injury, depression. We don't cure it, we don't heal it, we open a door. We open a door to let them welcome healing.
It seems that the combination of peer group support and the spiritual richness of the region really helps rebuild the souls of these young men, giving them confidence, strength, and the desire to start anew. On the most recent visit, 12 American veterans, most of whom were wounded in Iran and Iraq, were joined and escorted by 5 Israeli wounded veterans.
It's a great privilege for me to try to help my friends, American friends, in their early steps of injury in their life.
Uri, who was injured and captured in '73 while fighting at the Suez Canal, began an organization in the 90s to help rehabilitate fellow prisoners of war in Israel. Happily married and a father of 3, Uri has contributed to veteran rehabilitation in countries worldwide.
I think that it might be a good example for them to see that it is possible to build a life after the injury.
The deep bonding and relationships that develop during the trip are built to continue as a lifelong support system for the men once they return home. Together, they share, laugh, cry, and heal while visiting Israel's holy sites, historical battle monuments, as well as the country's beautiful natural wonders.
It's helped me a lot so far. I haven't really had anyone to talk to over the few years because everyone from my platoon's gone. I finally have a group of people I can lean on when I need help now.
One of the highlights of the trip is a baptism that many of the Americans participate in with Pastor Todd at the Yardenit. The historical Jordan River was John's original baptism site.
Bringing Jews and Christians together in a way that's healing in a river with no church here, no synagogue, no Catholic church, no Protestant church, just here sharing and making that expression of I want to be whole. It's very emotional for them, and it's very healing to be with people that are in the IDF, have been part of combat, who also have been injured, and to watch those two groups come together. There's just something that happens. You can't really put words on things that happen that are so spiritual of nature.
For veteran Marine Greg Kruder, visiting the Holocaust Museum Yad Vashem was the turning point in his healing process.
The girl that was our tour guide started to recite the names of all the people, and she said something that was really moving. She said that it wasn't a number, it wasn't 6 million or 6 million plus, that everyone had one story and one name 6 million plus times. And that really struck me because I love the military. I did 19 years and I didn't want to get out. And then all of a sudden I was out because I was injured. And then when I came home and I tried to go back to work, I couldn't go to work because I was injured. And I became another number in a pile of numbers that had to go to get medical help or had to get benefits or had to go apply for this. It was my moment when I heard her say loud and clear, "You have a name, everyone has a name." And that made a difference to me, and that really, that was the point that really changed things for me. I was able to get off a lot of my medications, had confidence and belief in myself again and the things that I did. Now I'm back again on a new trip as a coach and trying to help other wounded veterans have the same experience that I did.
This is Ayelet Saban reporting for Israel Up Close.
In local finance, the shekel today strengthened against the U.S. dollar while weakening against all other major foreign currencies. And due to the closure of the stock market over the end of the Sukkot holiday and Fridays, here's a look at the closing numbers on Tuesday. The IBA weather team says that we can expect isolated rain showers in the north and along the coast tomorrow with no significant change in temperatures. Here's a forecast at home and abroad for the next 24 hours. Thank you for joining us this evening. We hope to see you again tomorrow at our Saturday time of 6 p.m. when I'll be back to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a great evening and Shabbat Shalom from Jerusalem.